Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast for anxiety and OCD. I've added that little part, anxiety and OCD, because nobody knows what AT Parenting Survival means, but you probably do because you listen to me. I am excited to share with you my interview with Dr. Sara Conley today from NOCD. NOCD just released this groundbreaking study on virtual ERP for kids, which has floored me because of the results. And so I reached out to NOCD and said, can you come on and talk about this? Because there are very little research studies on children and teens that meet criteria for OCD and treatment options that are big studies. They might have 20 kids or 100 kids or 200 kids, but it's really hard to get that many kids in a study. And that's why this study is so phenomenal, is because of the amount of kids that were in this study, which gives that study so much more validity and hope. We'll talk about that in a second. But before I jump into my interview today with Dr. Conley, I do want to let you know that actually this episode is sponsored by NOCD. And I am a huge believer in NOCD, whether they sponsor this episode or not, or sponsor this podcast or not. I just wouldn't recommend something I didn't wholeheartedly believe in. And NOCD has changed the game in OCD treatment for kids and teens and adults. And they offer affordable, effective, convenient therapy. They are available in the US and outside the US. And even if you're not sure, you can schedule a free 15-minute consultation to see if NOCD is even a right fit for you or your child. You can just go to treatmyocd.com. That is treatmyocd.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes. But we're going to dive into NOCD today. While I had Dr. Conley here, I got to ask her a lot of other questions about NOCD and things that I really didn't even know about. There are some things that she talked to me about that I didn't know they were offering. That is phenomenal. So without further ado, here is my interview with Dr. Sara Conley. Well, I want to welcome Dr. Conley to the show. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We have so many people in my community that use NOCD, and I am really excited to dive into this groundbreaking research that has come out that you guys have done. But before we get started, can you tell us what your role is in NOCD?
Yeah, so I am, I think technically the senior manager of child and adolescent services. So what that means is I am responsible for creating and delivering the training that all of our network of therapists receive on taking what they learn about ERP and OCD when they're onboarding with us, and tailoring that to how do I apply this to work with children and teens and their families. So we cover ages from 5 all the way up through 17 and then adulthood, but work with as young as 5. So helping them take ERP and OCD knowledge that they have and tweak that even further to be applicable to all ages.
Yeah, and I love that because it's like there aren't a lot of OCD therapists in general. And then to work with kids on top of that is like a rainbow unicorn. It's impossible. Yeah. So I love how you guys, you train and then you train them to work with kids. And so it just opens up the pool of opportunity for parents as well.
It does. It definitely does. And we take the training that we deliver very seriously. So I know that I mentioned ERP and OCD, but it starts even more fundamental than that. So we have training courses that we've developed internally on like milestones that you should expect in children and building rapport in children and general behavioral strategies. And then it gets more specific into ERP and OCD and how OCD can impact school and including family and treatment and accommodations and what all that looks like. So we do really help to set a foundational base too, because that's often a question I get is, well, isn't working with kids like its own specialty? Absolutely, and we can train that within our specific specialty of, in this case, ERP and OCD and related disorders. We can train both that foundation that's needed and then that specificity of how we actually make ERP work for again, all ages from
Yeah,
5
which
plus.
is so great. Yeah, I saw a message on social media yesterday where someone was like, well, my child's 7, so they can't really, like a 7-year-old can't do exposures. And it's like,
Yeah, they can.
yeah, they
Yeah,
can.
they
They
can.
absolutely
Uh-huh.
can. Even
Mm-hmm.
younger, they can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, can you tell us about the recent study that was published on virtual exposure response prevention? I get that question a lot as far as, oh, but it's virtual. Is that going to be effective? And you guys just did a groundbreaking study on specifically virtual ERP for kids.
We did, yeah, and we had a very similar study completed in adults, and so then took kind of that same approach of seeing, does this model of virtual ERP therapy work with kids? And it is the study. We have 2,173 children and adolescent,
Wow, that's a big study.
yeah, children and adolescent patients at the point of publication. And the awesome part about that is that all of those are individuals with primary diagnosis of OCD. So that's not only that large of a sample of kids, but that large of a sample of kids actually meeting diagnostic criteria is unheard of a lot of times. And so it's one of the largest studies. And like you said, it's looking at our virtual delivery of ERP. And one, does this work? Two, how well does it work? And three, how quickly does this work? And what we saw is that we saw a pretty significant reduction in OCD symptoms. So that's just over like 38.5%. So between 38 and 39% of symptoms between that 13 and 17 week mark, we saw improvement. And over half of the kids were meeting full response criteria. So like OCD was at a point where it was feeling fully managed by families. But the nice yes, and right, like, and I get so excited about it. I'm now talking over you. But the exciting part about that is that in that 13 to 17 week period, what that averaged out to was 11 and a half therapist hours or 11 and a half therapy hours, which is not that much in the grand scheme of things. So that's great.
Yeah, that number just really surprised me.
Yeah.
It's so high.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
And
it's
in
such
such a
little
short period of
time.
time.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, that is really crazy. The other thing that I really liked is in the study, families were involved in the treatment process. I'm always on my
Yes.
soapbox talking about family, family, and so many OCD therapists, particularly in Canada. I don't know why. I don't know why they don't involve the family.
Yeah.
And maybe Australia too, like different rules and how they go about it. But I love that in your study, families were involved in the treatment process. How important is it for parents and caregivers to be part of the therapy journey?
So incredibly important. So incredibly important. What I like to say is that if you're only working with the child, right? And part of our study talks about the benefits of like front loading treatment, if you will. So having sessions twice a week at the beginning to really set a really firm foundation. So if we're going with that number, that's 2 hours a week that you're in treatment with the kiddo. The other 166 hours, they're with their family. They're with their parents, their siblings, their grandparents, and those people do a lot to help shape how the child responds to OCD and often play a huge role in reinforcing OCD on their own. And not saying that they're doing it purposefully or even within their awareness. It's just the go-to for helping a child manage OCD is accommodating, is giving in, is making things feel better quickly instead of pushing back against OCD, which is often counter to parents' instincts, because it often is the opposite of let me jump in and help right now. Let me help you feel better in this immediate moment. And so because the quote right way to manage OCD is very different and very counter from instincts, and because parents have such an influence on their child's space and play such a big role in helping them to manage their emotions and their distress, it's very, very important that parents learn what OCD is, how it works, how it's reinforced, and what is a more helpful way to manage that OCD related distress in the long term.
Yeah, I totally agree. I always feel like it's like working with the arm and like forgetting that it's attached to a body.
Yeah.
There's a whole system there. And more often than not is counterintuitive how you're supposed to help your kids with OCD.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So parents need their own training because otherwise they'll inadvertently be a hindrance to the process.
Yeah.
If they don't get their own training. So I love that, NoCD can do that for families. You also have an app, and I actually
We
don't know
do.
the answer to this question. How does the app? I mean, I remember Stephen Smith came out with an app like back in like, I don't remember, it was like 2016 or 17.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was working with him like promoting the app, and I forgot about the app since then. I'm like, then you're like
Yeah.
huge and you're providing therapy. But I'm hearing that you're still incorporating the app. I'm sure it's a different beast now.
Mm-hmm.
How do you use that in treatment?
Yeah, so I've been with NOCD nearly 4 years. Next month it will be 4 years. And just in the time that I've been with NOCD, I feel like the app has undergone so many cool changes and shifts, and it's constantly developing. And we have so many more fun ideas for how it's going to continue and shift. But right now, one of the biggest benefits of the app, in my opinion, and other NOCD therapists might have different opinions, is the ability to communicate with the therapist in real time, essentially. And then also how well the app allows you to track and engage with ERP. And so often we're having parents serve as what I like to call an ERP coach. So especially for younger kids, when we're asking them to do exposures or practice response prevention, the parents are going to help coach them through. The parents often shoulder the mental burden of making sure this gets done. And so within the app, all of our members will have access to their hierarchy. They'll have access to functional assessments that were done to help identify, what are my triggers? What is the big fear that underlies my OCD? What are the compulsions that I'm normally engaging in? So as our therapists work closely with the families, they're building out all of this personal information related to the child's OCD in the app that the parent and the child will have access to outside. They also see like what their homework is. So which exposures are assigned for homework. They can track their distress levels throughout exposures as they're engaging in them. And every time they finish, it sends alert to the therapist of, oh, this exposure was done. Oh, this journal entry was finished. This tracking is done. So the therapist gets to see in real time how you're progressing and can chime in. Hey, great job doing the exposures. Or I saw your note on the exposure about XYZ. Like, here's how to try it next time.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. And it allows the communication piece is also great because like for older teens, we have what we call linked accounts. So the parent has kind of an avenue in the app, but the child or the teen has their own unique connection with the therapist as well. So the teen can have separate connection and communication with the therapist from the parent, and both have that access independent of one another to the therapist. So you really get to maintain both relationships and have the teen kind of build that autonomy in their treatment as well.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't think I really knew how you guys were using an app.
It's awesome.
Cool.
It really helps.
Therapists also will know, like, I haven't gotten any notifications.
Like where's your homework? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that parents can feel supported. They can go on the app and they can communicate. I always feel like that's such a nice thing when you feel like you have direct access to a therapist.
There is. And then separate from their own unique like therapy experience is the whole NOCD community that's part of the app. So then there's extra support that parents can get, that teens with appropriate oversight with parents can access and can ask questions of the community and chime in and help others. Once you get a good management of symptoms, and we call it, you become a treatment conqueror. So see that reduction in symptoms, you earn a conqueror badge. And so then everyone on the app, if you choose to share it, sees that you're a conqueror and can ask conquerors different questions. We also have support groups offered through the apps for our active NOCD members. So there's a lot built within that app. Mm-hmm.
There is a lot more than I realized. That is awesome to hear. How does NOCD ensure that therapy is integrated into a family's routine? That's always a tricky thing as well.
That is a great question. That can be very difficult to make sure, right? Like we're fitting in time in our already hectic, busy schedules for not only the therapy sessions, but homework. And so one of the requirements of all of our therapists is to have a certain number of evening and weekend hours to make treatment more accessible for families. So that helps to kind of check that box of making time within their week for that set therapy session. Having that flexibility of whenever you're available, we hope to have therapists available for you. And then as far as that homework piece, working really to integrate ERP into the lifestyle can be very, very helpful. And that's usually taking more, like emphasizing more of that RP focus of that response prevention, because kids are triggered all the time. Exposures can be triggered all of the time. So part of homework can be, well, when you're out doing things that you already do, how can we change how you respond to OCD? So we can do that to kind of help fuse ERP into day-to-day life. And then also just making sure that we're setting aside time, that we're creating structured exposures that are feasible, that fit within the day-to-day, but also emphasizing the importance to parents of this is a short-term thing, right? After 11 and a half committed hours, right? Between which 13 to 17 weeks here of 1 to 2 sessions a week, your child will experience a reduction in OCD. We won't need to be this diligent about homework. So I guess that last piece is also highlighting how it might be difficult in the short term, but it's only in the short term. And if we can find a way to prioritize this, often it gets better pretty darn quick. And then we do more of just that day-to-day integration piece.
Yeah. And I think seeing that study and seeing those numbers can give parents hope too, that, it might be a lot of work in the short term, but when you do all that work, it really does pay off.
It does. It does. And when you consider how much time you're spending giving into OCD or letting OCD dictate the rules or handling meltdowns that are resulting from OCD related distress, really, you often spend less time pushing back than you do feeding OCD if you are comparing those numbers as well. So that's another thing that I like to bring to parents' attention is it feels hard and it is a lot of work, and it's often very, very worth it and is less work over time than continuing to feed OCD.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing that I really appreciate about NOCD, I mean, before NOCD was doing what it was doing, I really struggled to help connect parents to evidence-based therapists. And if I could find that unicorn, they were like so expensive. And I get it as a therapist myself. Like, OCD therapists charge a lot and they don't take insurance. And NOCD has really changed the game around that.
Yes.
NOCD accepts what, like 90% of insurance plans. So I wonder how that impacts availability and accessibility for parents, what you're seeing.
Yeah, it increases it significantly, right? The amount of insurance coverage. And then even for those without insurance coverage, we have the flexibility of payment plans that we can use. We have our whole billing department that can work to make treatment more accessible, even outside of that insurance. But yes, we accept 90+% of all insurance companies. It makes it a lot easier to be able to offer that care at a more widespread place. And then also the virtual component helps us to do that as well, right? Like within more centralized city-based locations, you can find treatment a lot easier, unfortunately, right? Like I'm primarily in the San Diego area, but with my California license can provide treatment up and down California, including in more rural areas where families may typically have to drive an hour or an hour and a half to even be able to access an OCD specialist. Now that's not the case. If you've got insurance and a computer or a phone, some way to connect with us via video, we can make treatment work for you, which is awesome.
And I mean, parents will often ask me like, well, is virtual even going to work with a child? And I know when I was practicing, virtual was better. When COVID hit and I was still practicing, I was in their bedroom. Like I was in their house. I was seeing what they were having issues with. And so instead of creating some artificial exposure in my office, it was like literally go grab your mom or go grab that thing that's contaminated. And we were right there in the middle. And I found that was so much more effective. Those kids got better faster than the ones that were coming into my office.
Yeah, it takes away the need for kids to generalize that learning from the office setting to the home setting, right? And especially with younger kids, generalization is hard. It is hard to take the learning from this specific situation and learn, oh, yeah, that applies to all of these situations. That's a hard thing. And OCD can be so rigid. Well, yeah, I touched that in Sarah's office and it was fine because it was in Sarah's office, but I can't touch that at home because of this whole new set of rules. So you're exactly right. Being virtual allows us to be right there immediately in the triggers with them. It also lets us do things like go to the park with them or go to the grocery store with them. And we could do that in person, but then there's obviously more logistics around it, and there could be more travel fees if we're needing to travel. There can be limits to confidentiality because then you're out in public with the clients, and now that's something that we don't need to consider, right? It's like, okay, well, we can talk in your car about what you're going to go do. If you want to take me with you, you can take me with you on the phone, and it just looks like you're having a phone call because that's so standard nowadays, and then come back to the car and we'll talk all about it. So it just offers so much more flexibility and also lets us get those corrective experiences around OCD in ways that are beneficial for how kids' brains learn, which is awesome.
I think I don't think parents realize the amount of things that you can do virtually. I think sometimes parents think, oh, they're just going to sit in front of a computer and they're going to be bored or they're going to be restless. And both my kids do virtual therapy and, with specialists on the other coast of where we live. Yeah. And like my son with ARFID, like he is carrying the laptop and he's in the kitchen cooking with her and he's like making things and showing, and like, he's all over the house, and I think that is, that is the benefit is kind of what you're talking about, that if he was just in an office sitting there, I think he would get nothing out of it. But because he's able to eat and go to the refrigerator and like do these eating exposures and look at the cabinet and she can see him struggling. It's perfect. So I think virtual is amazing. So the study's findings are significant because they're really a huge step in addressing pediatric OCD, which I feel like has been the stepchild of even OCD, and OCD is the stepchild of mental health in general.
Yes.
So what do you hope this study will mean for the future of OCD treatment, and especially with children and teens?
Yeah, I love that you said it's a stepchild. It's such I feel that way about child research in general. It is often so second. It is the stepchild to any adult research, and we know with OCD research, it is harder. But yes, like what the pieces where there are kid research is like a gold mine. I feel like often when I'm educating, it's like, well, we're not exactly sure how it looks in kids, but this is how it is in adults, so we can assume. But the nice thing about the study now is we do not need to assume, right? We know that it works. And my hope for the future of OCD treatment is that that this shows more parents how worth it can be to seek care and how accessible care can be, right? It is a commitment, but it is a relatively short commitment, especially compared to what we know, the chronic nature of OCD if left untreated and the impairment that can result from it if left untreated. So just knowing that, it is accessible, it is a relatively small-ish time commitment. It requires dedication, but our results speak for themselves, right? Kids get better, and they get better pretty darn quickly. And so hoping that, we're continuing to be able to expand and offer more virtual options, offer more insurance coverage, right? We can also take things like these studies, and we do at NOCD, take findings from our studies, take findings from our treatment outcomes that we show to insurances and say, see, this works. Like, people in your network need this. So be able to get more insurances on board, be able to continue to grow our network, offer NOCD therapy in a variety of different areas just to increase that accessibility and make OCD treatment and ERP very well known, easily accessible, and a quick go-to. So as soon as families are recognizing, I think my child is having problematic levels of anxiety, or this may be OCD, they have an easy go-to to be able to identify, are they actually having difficulties that are in line with OCD? And if yes, let's get them treated sooner rather than later, so we can stop this global problem with OCD being left untreated for years and years and years in children and in adults.
Yeah, and it's been a game changer because I'm not seeing people having to go to multiple therapists before there's all this damage done, and then they get to a trained OCD therapist. I'm seeing parents come in, they're identifying there's a struggle, they're referred to NOCD, they start to make improvement. It's like, that's the way it should be. That's the way it is for a lot of other mental health issues. So it is definitely changing the landscape, I think, of pediatric OCD, which is awesome. So to wrap up, for parents and caregivers that are listening to the podcast who might have a child struggling with OCD, what advice would you offer them?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question and way to wrap up. First, give yourself some space and some grace. It is hard to be a child or a parent of a child with OCD, or to be a parent of a child struggling with high anxiety levels, whether you know it's OCD or not. Next would be to seek out someone, or either NOCD or someone else near you who knows about OCD and can help complete an assessment for you and give you more clarity around what your child is experiencing, labels for that, treatment recommendations for that, to kind of help give you a path forward. Also finding a sense of community for parents, which I think is where your community, Natasha, comes in play. Know that you are not alone. Know that there are resources for you as the parent as well. And then if it does end up being OCD that your child is struggling with, seek out exposure and response prevention treatment. It's the gold standard treatment for OCD. It's what we offer at NOCD, and we would be more than happy to have them come to NOCD and get connected with a therapist there.
And even if they're not sure if it's OCD, NOCD can do an assessment, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We can do an assessment. We also offer even just parent education sessions. So if you want to come and have, we call them NOCD 411 sessions, where you get to ask a bunch of questions about, this is happening and this is happening, and what do you think about this? The one caveat with 411 sessions is because those are more education based and not therapy based, they're not covered by insurance. So that is that one. But yes, we can always do an assessment, and then you can decide what you want to do from there. So even just calling and saying, hey, can I have my child evaluated for OCD? I think that's going on. I know this past weekend, we opened a lot of extra sessions just for that exact purpose, of more of a diagnostic clinic of, if you have questions, if you think you're having struggles with OCD, come and see us, and we'll tell you one way or the other, and we'll give you treatment recommendations. We also treat anxiety, body focused repetitive behaviors, hoarding disorder. So it's not just OCD, more of those related conditions we can offer empirically supported and evidence-based treatment for as well. So if it turns out it's not OCD, it's social anxiety, that's okay too. We still have all of the tools to be able to provide the family with the treatment support that they need.
Oh, that's good to know. That is really good to know.
Yeah.
So where can families go to learn more about NOCD or to set up a consultation?
Yeah, the easiest place is treatmyocd.com. So from there, you'll be able to set up an initial consultation call. You'll be able to look at therapists available in your states based off of your insurance. You can confirm that, yep, your insurance actually is covered, and go from there. And we're one of our main values is being able to deliver care as quickly as possible to families. And so there's often not a long wait from your initial call to being connected with a therapist and having that first session scheduled. So that's something that's really important to us, is once you seek treatment, you don't have to wait months and months and months for a first session, which can also happen in more private-based care, just because there's not as many people offering that specific care.
It does happen. People are sitting on waiting lists for forever.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing the
study
and what NOCD can offer. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Well, I hope that you found that interview helpful. Definitely, if you've been looking for OCD treatment, or you're not sure, but you feel concerned that your child, teen, or young adult, or yourself has OCD, even just getting an assessment from them is really helpful. So go to treatmyocd.com, and I was just so floored by how the percentage of people that got significantly better with only 13 to 17 sessions, and it's virtual. And, obviously I felt that way, and I'm sure NOCD felt that way, but to get objective research that confirms that is so powerful. So check them out. And also want to let you know that we are doing a free series that's starting on Thursday, Survival Tools for Parents Who Are Raising Kids with Anxiety and OCD. I'm going to be talking about where to start no matter where you've been on this journey, and how to get some concrete skills, even if your child has their foot firmly on the brake. So you can register for free at atparentingsurvivalseries.com. That is atparentingsurvivalseries.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes as well. And I do hope that you find the sparkle in everything you do. And I'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.